As my body slammed into the freezing water, the last thing I saw was my half-sister's smile. She looked relieved, not afraid. "Say hi to the sharks for me." She laughed. My father turned his back while my stepmother watched me drown like a boring experiment. They believed my $6.5 billion fortune was finally theirs. They started planning my funeral, but they forgot one small detail. I am extremely hard to kill. My name is Ivy Flores, but for the last 3 weeks, my family has called me the late Ivy Flores. The water hit me like concrete. It was not the splash you see in movies, the graceful entry of a diver slicing through the surface. It was a violent, bone-rattling collision that knocked the wind out of my lungs before the cold even registered. But when the cold did hit, it was absolute. It was 1,000 needles piercing every inch of my skin simultaneously, a shock so profound that my heart stuttered in my chest. I fought the urge to inhale, forcing my eyes open in the stinging salt water. The bubbles were chaotic, a silver cloud of confusion. But through the distortion of the surface, I could still see them. The lights of the yacht, the silver promise, were blurring above me like distant stars moving further away. I saw the silhouette of my father, Harlan. He was not looking over the rail. He was already turning his back, walking away towards the cabin as if he had simply discarded a wrapper on the street. And then there was Clarissa, my stepmother. She was leaning over the railing, her arms crossed over her chest. She looked down at me, not with horror, not with the panic of a mother watching a child drown, but with the detached curiosity of a scientist watching a lab rat struggle in a maze. Next to her stood Savannah, my half-sister. The vibration of her voice didn't travel through the water, but the memory of her last words echoed in my skull with terrifying clarity. "Say hi to the sharks for me." She had smiled when she said it. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated relief. It was the smile of someone who had finally taken out the trash. My lungs burned, the weight of my evening gown, a heavy silk thing Clarissa had insisted I wear, began to drag me down. The darkness of the ocean was eager to swallow me. As I sank, watching the hull of the yacht grow smaller, a singular, crystalline realization cut through the panic. They thought I was dead. They believed that the $6.5 billion attached to my name was finally, legally, theirs. They were probably already drafting the press release. They were mentally arranging the funeral flowers. They were rehearsing their tearful eulogies about the tragic accident that claimed the life of their beloved, unstable daughter. They forgot one small detail. I am extremely hard to kill. 3 weeks later, the living room of the Flores estate in Harborcrest was exactly as I remembered it. Though the air felt different today, it smelled of expensive lilies and hypocrisy. I sat in the high-backed velvet armchair in the center of the room, my legs crossed, my posture perfect. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. I had disabled the security system an hour ago, a system I had designed for them 5 years prior, and let myself in. I heard the heavy oak front door creak open, then came the voices. Thank God that is over. Clarissa sighed, her voice carrying the sharp click of heels on marble. I thought the priest was going to drone on forever about her charitable spirit. It is difficult to look mournful for 2 solid hours. My face muscles are cramping. She would have wanted it that way. "Mom," Savannah replied, her voice light and airy. A grand exit for a grand tragedy. "Did you see the press? They ate it up. The grieving sister angle is playing very well on social media. Engagement is up 300% since the obituary went live." Harlan grunted, the sound of a man eager for a drink. "Let us just get the lawyers on the phone. The death certificate needs to be expedited if we want access to the trust by the end of the quarter." They walked into the living room, a trio of vultures in designer black. They were shedding their jackets, loosening their ties, physically relaxing into the victory they thought they had secured. They were laughing. It was a soft, conspiratorial laughter, the sound of people who had gotten away with murder and were about to cash the check. Then, Savannah looked up. The scream died in her throat, choking her. She dropped her alligator skin handbag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. spilling lipstick and tissues onto the Persian rug. Clarissa froze mid-step. Her hand, which had been reaching up to remove her diamond earrings, clawed into the air. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the back of the nearest sofa, her impeccably made-up face draining of all color until she looked like a wax figure left too long in the sun. And my father, Harlan Flores, the man who had turned his back. He did not gasp. He simply staggered, his knees buckling as if the strings holding him up had been severed. His eyes went wide, but I did not see joy in them. I did not see the relief of a father finding his lost child. I saw terror, pure, unadulterated terror. He looked like he was seeing a ghost, and in a way, he was. I did not move. I just watched them. I let the silence stretch, thick and suffocating, filling the room until it felt heavier than the ocean water that had filled my lungs. I adjusted the white medical bandage wrapped around my left forearm, covering the long, jagged scar that ran from my elbow to my wrist. "Hello, family," I said. My voice was calm. It was steady. It lacked the trembling vibrato of the victim they expected me to be. It was the voice I used in boardrooms when I was about to dismantle a competitor. No one spoke. Savannah was shaking her head slightly, a jerky, mechanical motion. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible. "No, I saw you go under. I saw the bubbles stop." I ignored her. I leaned forward slightly and gestured to the coffee table between us. Sitting there, stark against the dark wood, was a square box wrapped in reflective silver paper. It was not large, perhaps the size of a thick novel, but it dominated the room. "I brought you gifts," I said, my eyes locking with Clarissa's. "Open them." Still, they did not move. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. They stared at the silver box as if it were a bomb. In their minds, it might as well have been. They knew what they had done. They knew I knew. And the fact that I was sitting here, dry and breathing, meant that their narrative of the tragic accident had just shattered into a million irreparable pieces. "Go on," I urged gently. "It is rude to refuse a gift from the dead." Clarissa took a step back, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "What is this?" "Ivy," she hissed, though her voice lacked its usual venomous bite. It was thin, brittle. "How are you here?" We searched. The Coast Guard searched for 7 days. You stopped the search after 2 days." "Clarissa," I corrected her, my tone conversational. "I saw the report. You cited emotional closure as the reason to call off the divers. It was a fiscally responsible decision. Divers are expensive." Harlan finally found his voice. It was a croak. "Ivy, honey, we thought we lost you." "Don't," I said. The single word was sharp enough to cut the air. "Do not insult my intelligence. Harlan, not today." I stood up slowly. The movement made them flinch. I walked around the silver box, tracing the edge of the table with my finger. Inside that box is not a bomb. It is not a weapon. It is something far more cruel. It is a mirror. It is the first piece of a puzzle that I'm going to force you to put together, piece by agonizing piece. I looked directly at them, but in my mind, I was addressing the world. I was addressing the jury that would one day sit in judgment of them. That box contains the beginning of your end. But that is just the opening act. To understand why I'm doing this, to understand why I did not just go to the police, why I am sitting in this living room playing games with the people who tried to murder me, you need to understand who I really am. You need to know what they did to me. Not just 3 weeks ago on that yacht, but every single day for the last 30 years. My name is Ivy Flores. I am 35 years old. To the public, I am the founder and CEO of HelioGuard Systems. I wrote the core code for the most secure cloud storage architecture in existence when I was 22. By the time I was 30, my company was handling data for 3 of the world's largest banks and a significant portion of the defense sector. My personal net worth is valued at $6.5 billion. I built my life on the concept of security. My entire career, my entire reputation, is built on the promise that I can keep things safe. I build firewalls that no hacker can breach. I design encryption keys that no supercomputer can crack. I identify vulnerabilities in systems that look invincible, and I patch them before anyone can exploit them. I am the best in the world at protecting assets. But as I stood there, watching my father wipe sweat from his upper lip, watching my sister tremble in her designer dress, I realized the bitter irony of my existence. I protect the digital assets of the entire world. I secure billions of dollars of trade every hour. I keep state secrets safe from foreign espionage. But the one thing I failed to protect, the one vulnerability I left wide open, was my own life. I let the enemy sleep down the hall. I let the people who wanted to destroy me sit at my dinner table, and because of that, I ended up at the bottom of the ocean. But the ocean spit me back out, and now I am going to show them that the girl they pushed off that boat is not the same woman standing in this room. Ivy, the victim, died in the water. The woman who climbed back out is something else entirely. "Open the box," I commanded, my voice dropping an octave, leaving no room for argument. Clarissa's hand shook violently as she reached for the silver lid. The foil crinkled, the sound explosively loud in the quiet room. She lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, was not a document, nor a jewel. It was a simple, water-damaged, waterproof watch. My watch, the one I had been wearing when I fell. The screen was cracked, frozen at the exact time I hit the water, 11:42 p.m., and beneath it, a single index card with a handwritten note. Savannah leaned in, reading the text over her mother's trembling shoulder. Her breath hitched. I know about the trust, and I know about Elena. The color that had left Harlan's face did not return. It turned a shade of gray that suggested a heart waiting to stop. "Who is Elena?" Savannah whispered, looking from her mother to her father, but they did not answer her. They couldn't, because the name Elena was a ghost they thought they had buried 30 years ago, deeper than they had tried to bury me. I smiled, a cold, razor-thin expression that did not reach my eyes. "Welcome home," I said. "We have a lot of catching up to do." My family home in Harborcrest was a masterpiece of colonial architecture, a pristine white mansion perched on the highest ridge of the town, looking down on the bay like a judge sitting on a high bench. The lawn was manicured to within a millimeter of its life. The hedges were geometrical perfection, and the pillars were tall and imposing. To the neighbors, to the magazines that featured Clarissa's interior design, it was a sanctuary of old money and impeccable taste. But to me, growing up inside those walls, it was a cold storage facility for human emotions. I was the glitch in their perfect matrix. Clarissa, my stepmother, was the curator of this museum. To the public, she was a saint. She was the chairwoman of the Harborcrest Charity Ball, the smiling face on the brochures for the local children's hospital. I would see her on the cover of lifestyle magazines, draped in pastel cashmere, holding a bouquet of hydrangeas, with headlines like "Clarissa Flores, the heart of our community." She had a soft, benevolent smile for the cameras, the kind that suggested she spent her weekends baking cookies for orphans. But the moment the front door clicked shut and the lens cap went back on, the warmth evaporated from her face as if someone had cut the power cord. I remember a Tuesday when I was 12 years old. I had come home from school with a raging fever, shivering so violently my teeth clattered together. Clarissa was in the foyer, directing the florists on where to place the imported lilies for a dinner party. I asked her for medicine. She did not look at me. She did not touch my forehead. She simply gestured vaguely toward the stairs and said, "Ivy, do not infect the living space. Go to your room and stay there until you are useful or healthy." I spent 3 days in bed, delirious, drinking tap water from the bathroom sink to stay alive. When I finally emerged, pale and 5 pounds lighter, she looked at me with a sigh of profound inconvenience and told me I looked like a ghost haunting her hallway. Then there was Savannah. My half-sister was 2 years younger than me, but she held the power in the house like a scepter. She was Clarissa's biological daughter, a miniature replica of her mother's golden ambition. Savannah did not walk. She floated, buoyed by the absolute certainty that the world had been paved specifically for her feet. To Savannah, I was not a sister. I was an interloper. I was a parasite that had attached itself to her father's wallet and her mother's patience. She would leave her expensive toys broken in my room and claim I had stolen them. She would whisper to her friends when I walked by, loud enough for me to hear, "That is just Ivy. Mom says we have to keep her because Dad feels guilty, but she is not really one of us." She grew up with the implicit understanding that everything, the house, the money, the name was hers by right, and I was merely squatting in her future inheritance. And then there was my father, Harlan Flores. He was the most painful puzzle piece of all. Harlan was a titan of industry, a man who could negotiate logistics deals with hostile foreign governments, but could not manage a 3-minute conversation with his own daughter. He did not yell. He did not hit. He simply erased me. When he came home from work, his eyes would slide over me as if I were a piece of furniture he had been meaning to replace but never got around to. At the dinner table, the silence was heavy enough to choke on. Clarissa would talk about her committees. Savannah would chatter about ballet or horse riding. Harlan would nod, asking questions, engaging with them. But if I spoke, if I tried to share a grade or a drawing, the air would freeze. He would clear his throat, avoid my eyes, and ask Clarissa if the roast was dry. It taught me a brutal lesson early on. My existence was a mistake he was trying to ignore until it corrected itself. There were moments that burned themselves into my memory like branding irons. My 16th birthday. I came downstairs, my heart fluttering with a stupid, resilient hope. There was no cake. There were no balloons. The dining table was set for 3. Clarissa, Harlan, and Savannah were dressed in evening wear. Clarissa looked at me in my jeans and t-shirt and frowned. "Oh, we are going out to celebrate Savannah's recital. Make yourself a sandwich, and try not to leave crumbs on the counter." They left. I sat in the dark kitchen, eating a slice of dry bread, and I whispered happy birthday to myself until I cried. My college graduation was the final nail in the coffin of my childhood expectations. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science. I stood on the stage, the dean handing me my diploma, the bright lights blinding me. I looked out into the sea of parents, the fathers holding cameras, the mothers wiping tears, the siblings cheering. I scanned every row. I looked for Harlan's gray suit. I looked for Clarissa's perfect hair. I even looked for Savannah's bored expression. The seats reserved for the Flores family were empty. Later, I received a text from Harlan's assistant, Mr. Flores had a scheduling conflict. Congratulations. That was the day I decided I would never need them again. Or so I told myself. I channeled every ounce of my pain into code. While Savannah was partying in Ibiza on Daddy's credit card, I was in a basement apartment, surviving on instant noodles and caffeine, building the architecture for what would become HelioGuard. I taught myself encryption protocols by breaking into dummy servers. I worked freelance security jobs for shady cryptocurrency startups just to pay rent. I refused to take a single cent from Harlan after I turned 18. I wanted my survival to be mine and mine alone. When HelioGuard launched, it was a monster. The valuation skyrocketed. Suddenly, Ivy Flores was not just the awkward, unwanted daughter. I was a tech unicorn. I was the new face of cybersecurity. And that was when the dynamic shifted. It was subtle at first. Clarissa began commenting on my social media posts with heart emojis. Savannah followed me back on Instagram. When Forbes put me on their 30 under 30 list, my father sent me a bottle of vintage wine. I remember the press conference when we announced our first billion-dollar government contract. My family showed up uninvited. Clarissa pushed her way to the front, grabbing my arm, beaming at the cameras. She hugged me, her perfume overpowering the smell of the ozone from the server room. "We are so proud of our girl," she told a reporter from the Times. "We always knew she was special. We gave her the space to grow. You know, we nurtured this independence." I stood there, stiff as a board, letting her hug me. I should have pushed her away. I should have told the cameras the truth. But the starving child inside me, The little girl who just wanted her mother to look at her without disgust stayed silent. Later that night, back at their estate because they insisted we celebrate as a family, the mask slipped. We were in the kitchen. Savannah was scrolling through the photos of us online. "You look a bit tired in this one." "Ivy," Savannah said, zooming in on my face, "but the stock price is looking good. Do not forget who supported you when you were a nobody." Clarissa chimed in, sipping her champagne. "Yes, darling. It is good you are finally making something of yourself. It repays the investment we made in your upbringing, all those years of private school, the food, the roof. We expect you to be generous now. Family takes care of family." I wanted to scream that they had given me nothing but a roof over a head full of nightmares, but I did not. I wrote them a check to cover some renovations on the estate. I bought Savannah a car for her birthday. I fell into the trap of buying the love I could not earn. I had a pathological need for their validation. I used to dream that if I hit 2 billion, or 5 billion, or 10 billion, eventually the number would be high enough to fill the hole in Harlan's heart, where his love for me should have been. I thought if I became the most powerful person in the room, they would finally respect me. I was wrong. They did not respect me. They just got hungrier. Then came the letter. It arrived 3 weeks ago. It was on heavy, cream-colored stationery, the kind Clarissa ordered from Paris. Her handwriting was elegant, looping script, Ivy. It read, "We have been distant, too distant. Your father is getting older, and he has been reflecting on things. We want to make it right. Just the 4 of us. A private trip on the Silver Promise. No press, no staff, just family. A chance to heal old wounds and start fresh. Please, come home." I sat in my corner office, looking at the skyline of the city I had conquered, holding that piece of paper. My logic centers, the ones that assessed risk for Fortune 500 companies, were screaming at me. Why now? Why no staff? Why the sudden sentimentality from a man who missed your graduation? But the emotional part of my brain, the part that was still 12 years old and shivering with a fever, overruled the logic. I wanted it to be true. God, I wanted it to be true so badly. I wanted a dad who wanted to reflect on things. I wanted a sister who wasn't a bully. I wanted a mother figure who didn't look at me like a stain. So I agreed. I prepared for the trip with a pathetic amount of hope. I bought a new wardrobe, things I thought Clarissa would approve of, nothing too flashy, nothing too tech geek. I practiced conversations in the mirror. I rehearsed how I would tell Dad about the new acquisition targets for HelioGuard, thinking he might finally see me as a peer. I packed gifts for them. I ignored the red flags, and there were so many. When I called Clarissa to confirm the time, she emphasized, twice, that I should not tell my assistant the exact coordinates of where we were going. We need absolute privacy. Darling, we do not want the paparazzi ruining our healing time. When I texted Savannah to ask what she was packing, she replied with a joke that felt off. Just a bikini and a smile. The water is going to be great. Plus, Dad bought a new lens for his camera. It captures everything beautifully on the open sea. And when I arrived at the dock, walking toward the gleaming white hull of the Silver Promise, I saw my father standing on the deck. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the horizon, his jaw set tight, his hands gripping the railing so hard his knuckles were white. He looked like a man marching to a funeral, not a vacation. When I stepped aboard, he finally turned to me. He didn't smile. He didn't say he was glad I came. He just looked at my shoes and said, "Watch your step. The deck gets slippery when it is wet." That was the only advice he gave me. I walked onto that boat carrying a suitcase full of hope and a heart ready to be mended. I left my security detail on the shore because I trusted them. I trusted the people who shared my last name. I should have read the signals. I built an entire platform based on predictive analytics, on seeing the disaster before it happens. My software protects billions of dollars from Russian hackers and corporate spies. But I could not read the risk standing right in front of me holding a glass of champagne. I was a fool. I was a lonely, desperate fool. And as the yacht pulled away from the dock, cutting through the dark water, leaving the safety of the land behind, I had no idea that I was not a guest of honor. I was the cargo. The morning we boarded the Silver Promise, the sky was a shade of blue so aggressive it felt artificial. The yacht was a sleek, 150-foot beast of fiberglass and chrome, gleaming under the Florida sun like a freshly polished knife. It was the kind of vessel that screamed new money, the kind Clarissa loved to be photographed on. But as I stepped onto the teak deck, my internal alarm system, the one I had spent a lifetime ignoring in favor of emotional desperation, gave a quiet warning ping. The crew was skeletal, usually. A vessel of this tonnage required a staff of at least 6 to operate smoothly: a captain, a first mate, stewards, a chef. Today, there was only a captain, a man whose face I never saw clearly behind the tinted glass of the bridge, and a single deckhand who moved with the silent efficiency of someone paid to be invisible. I looked around for the safety briefings. The life vests that were legally required to be visible. There were none. The deck was stripped bare of anything that looked like emergency equipment. "It is just us," Clarissa said, appearing at my elbow with a glass of champagne. She was wearing a white linen caftan that cost more than my first car. We wanted it intimate, no strangers listening to our conversations. I took the glass. The crystal was cold against my palm. I scanned the horizon. We were the only boat leaving the marina. Throughout the morning, the atmosphere was brittle. It felt like a stage play where the actors had forgotten their lines and were improvising based on tension alone. Clarissa kept checking her watch. It was a diamond-encrusted Cartier I had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. She checked it every 5 minutes, her eyes darting from the dial to the position of the sun, as if she were running a train schedule rather than enjoying a family vacation. Savannah was worse. She was pacing the aft deck, phone in hand. She was not taking selfies, which was her usual state of being. She was checking the signal strength. She was adjusting the settings on a professional-grade camera set up on a tripod facing the open ocean. "Is the lighting okay?" she muttered to herself. "I need the shadows to be right for the main scene." "The main scene?" I asked, stepping closer. She jumped, nearly dropping her phone. "Just a figure of speech." "Ivy, God, do not creep up on people. I am making a vlog, a time-lapse of the sunset. It needs to be perfect." And then there was my father. Harlan was standing by the railing, staring at the wake the yacht was cutting through the water. I walked up to him, wanting to say something, anything, to bridge the gap. "Dad," I said softly. He flinched. It was a physical spasm, a full-body jerk, as if I had touched him with a live wire. He turned to look at me, and for a second, his eyes were wide, filled with a chaotic mix of guilt and fear. Then the mask slammed back down. He looked past my ear, focusing on a point 1,000 miles away. "The water is calm today," he said. His voice was hollow. By late afternoon, we were miles offshore. The coastline of Harbor Crest was gone, swallowed by the curvature of the earth. We were a white speck in a universe of deep, indifferent indigo. That was when the engines stopped. The silence was sudden and violent, the low hum of the diesel motors, a sound you stopped noticing after a few hours, cut out completely, leaving only the slap of water against the hull and the cry of a distant gull. It felt as though the heartbeat of the world had stopped. "Why are we stopping?" I asked, setting my empty glass on a table. "Engine trouble," Clarissa said quickly. Too quickly. "The captain is checking it. Let us have a toast while we wait." Savannah poured fresh champagne. The bubbles hissed in the quiet air. She handed a glass to Harlan, then to Clarissa, and finally to me. Her hand was steady, terrifyingly steady. "To family," Clarissa said, raising her glass. "To what we deserve," Savannah added, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. We drank. The champagne tasted like ash in my mouth. The sun began to dip, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. Clarissa walked over to where I was standing near the stern. The railing here was lower, designed for fishing or diving access. "You know, Ivy," Clarissa said, her voice conversational, almost bored. "We worry about you." I looked at her, surprised. "You do?" "Of course. Wealth is such a heavy burden. $6.5 billion. It is too much for one person. It isolates you. It makes you paranoid. It must be exhausting, wondering who you can trust. I have you guys. I said. The words tasted stupid the moment they left my lips. Savannah drifted closer. She was standing to my right, blocking my path back to the cabin. Harlan was to my left, his back turned to us, staring resolutely at the empty horizon. Do you fear the ocean? Ivy. Savannah asked. She sounded like a child asking about a bedtime story. I frowned. What kind of question is that? It is just so big, she continued, taking a step closer. It swallows things. It keeps secrets. If you fall in, nobody hears you scream. It is the ultimate silencer. The air around me seemed to thicken. My brain, the analytical engine that had built a fortune, finally screamed at me to move, get off the rail, get back to the center of the boat. I started to turn. I think I will go inside and get a jacket. I said. No, Savannah said. Stay. Time warped. It did not stop, but it stretched, rubber banding into a slow-motion nightmare. I saw Savannah's arm pull back. I saw the muscles in her shoulder tense. It was not a playful shove. It was a mechanical, forceful exertion of energy designed to displace weight. Her palms hit my shoulders. The force was shocking. I stumbled back. My heels caught on the wet teak. My center of gravity shifted over the abyss. As I tipped backward, flailing for a handhold that was not there, my eyes locked onto the tableau before me. Clarissa was watching. She had crossed her arms over her chest. She did not reach out. She did not scream. She looked like a supervisor watching a demolition crew bring down a condemned building. Harlan did not turn around. He hunched his shoulders, making himself smaller, refusing to witness the act. And Savannah. Her face was inches from mine as I fell away. She was smiling. It was a radiant, genuine smile. Say hi to the sharks for me, she whispered. Then the world inverted. Sky, water, impact. The ocean hit me like a sledgehammer. It was not like a pool. It was hard, unforgiving, and devastatingly cold. The air was punched out of my lungs in a single, agonized whoosh. I went under. The momentum driving me deep into the darkness. My dress, a heavy designer silk that looked beautiful on deck, instantly became a death shroud. It soaked up the water, weighing 50 pounds, wrapping around my legs like chains. Panic is a biological reflex. It is the lizard brain screaming breathe, fight, thrash. I wanted to open my mouth and scream. I wanted to claw at the water, but I was Ivy Flores. I was a CEO. I solved impossible problems for a living. Stop, I commanded myself. Thrashing burns oxygen. You have 40 seconds of air. Assess. I forced my limbs to stop jerking. I opened my eyes. The salt stung, blinding me. But I could see the turbulence of the bubbles rising. Up. That way was up. I kicked, fighting the drag of the dress. My lungs were burning, screaming for relief. I broke the surface, gasping, choking on a mouthful of spray. Help, I screamed. The word was swallowed by the vastness of the Atlantic. I looked up. The Silver Promise was already moving. The engines had restarted with a roar that vibrated in my chest. They were not turning around. They were accelerating. I watched them go. I watched the white hull shrink against the darkening horizon. Then, a wave slammed into me, pushing me back under, as I tumbled in the chaotic wash of the yacht's wake. My arm slammed into something hard. It was not a rock. It was debris. Maybe a piece of driftwood. Maybe garbage. Maybe something they had thrown overboard to weigh me down. A sharp, rusty edge sliced into my left forearm. I felt the skin part. It was a hot, searing line of fire that cut through the freezing cold. The pain was blinding. I gasped underwater, swallowing brine, choking. I kicked for the surface again, my arm throbbing in time with my heart. I broke the water, coughing, my vision graying at the edges. I looked at my arm. Even in the fading light, I could see the damage. A jagged gash ran from my elbow to my wrist. Dark blood was oozing out, swirling into the water like smoke. The pain cleared my head. It was sharp. It was real. They killed me. I thought, They actually killed me. No. They tried to kill me. If I die, they win. If I die. Savannah spends my money. If I die. Clarissa laughs at my funeral. Rage is a powerful fuel. It burns hotter than hope. I treaded water. Scanning the surface, the yacht was gone. I was alone in the middle of the ocean at dusk. The temperature was dropping. Hypothermia was the new enemy. Something bumped against my leg. I reached down. It was wood. A crate. Old. Splintered. Bobbing in the swell. It must have fallen off a cargo ship or a fishing boat. It was tied to a rusted metal buoy, the thing that had cut me. I grabbed the crate. It was slimy with algae, but it was buoyant. I wrapped my good arm around it. I hooked my bleeding arm over the top, pressing the wound against the wood to stem the flow. And then, night fell. You have never seen darkness until you have been alone in the ocean at night. It is absolute. The water below is an infinite void. The sky above is an indifferent dome. I drifted, to keep sane. I counted. The seconds between waves. 1, 2, 3, lift. 1, 2, 3, drop. I thought about my company. I thought about the quarterly report due on Tuesday. Who would present it? Mark from finance. Mark was an idiot. He would fumble the encryption metrics. I thought about the unread emails in my inbox. There were 312 unread messages. I obsessed over them. It was absurd. I was dying, floating on a piece of trash in the Atlantic, and I was worried about Mark messing up a PowerPoint presentation. But the mundane thoughts kept the terror at bay. If I thought about the sharks Savannah had joked about, I would panic. If I panicked, I would lose my grip. Hours bled into one another. My body went numb. The shivering started violent. Uncontrollable convulsions that racked my frame against the wooden crate. My teeth chattered so hard, I thought they would crack. Just let go. A soft voice in my head whispered, "It is warm down there. It is quiet. Just let go. Ivy." "No!" I snarled through chattering teeth. "I am not dying before I fire Mark." I drifted in and out of consciousness. I saw hallucinations. I saw Clarissa standing on the water, offering me a towel. I saw my father holding a life ring. But every time I reached for it, he pulled it away. Then, the sound changed. It was not the rhythmic slap of waves anymore. It was a thrum, a low mechanical chugging sound. Chug, 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 chug. I forced my eyes open. My eyelashes were crusted with salt. The sky was turning a bruised purple. Dawn. The sound was getting louder. I tried to shout, but my throat was raw, swollen from the salt water. All that came out was a croak. A light swept across the water, a yellow, focused beam. It blinded me for a second. I waved my good arm. It felt like lifting a lead weight. "Hey," I rasped. The beam moved past me, then snapped back. It locked onto me. The engine noise cut to an idle. I heard voices, rough, shouting voices, not English, Spanish. "Aquí mira." "Hey, alguien allí." A dark shape loomed over me. It smelled of diesel and dead fish. It was the most beautiful smell I had ever encountered. It was a fishing trawler, the paint peeling, the hull scarred. The name Marisol was painted on the side in fading red letters. A net was lowered. Hands reached down. Strong, calloused hands grabbed my wrists. I cried out as they pulled on my injured arm. But I did not let go. "Easy. Easy," a deep voice commanded. They hauled me over the gunwale. I landed on the deck, landing on a pile of wet nets. The deck was hard. It was solid. It was not moving. I lay there, gasping, water pooling around me. A face appeared above me, an old man, his face a road map of wrinkles, his skin the color of cured leather. He was wearing a yellow raincoat stained with grease. He looked at me, then at my evening gown, then at the gash on my arm. His eyes were dark and intelligent. "You are safe, girl," he said in heavily accented English. "You are safe now." I tried to speak. I tried to tell him my name. I tried to offer him money. But my body finally gave up. The adrenaline that had sustained me for 8 hours evaporated. The last thing I felt was the vibration of the boat's engine beneath my cheek, a steady, rhythmic promise that I was alive. And the last thought I had before the blackness took me was not of gratitude. It was a promise. I am coming back. The cabin of the Marisol smelled of diesel fumes, stale tobacco, and fish that had been dead for 3 days. To anyone else, it would have been a nauseating cocktail of odors. To me, wrapped in a scratchy wool blanket that felt like steel wool against my skin, it was the sweetest perfume I had ever inhaled. It smelled like oxygen. It smelled like a future. I was sitting on a narrow bunk, shivering uncontrollably. The adrenaline that had kept me paddling was fading, replaced by a bone-deep cold that made my teeth rattle like dice in a cup. The fisherman, whose name was Rafael Moreno, was tending to my arm. He was a man carved from mahogany and salt, with hands that were rough enough to sand wood but surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the jagged gash running down my forearm. He poured a clear liquid from an unmarked bottle over the wound. It stung so badly I saw white spots dancing in my vision, but I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper rather than scream. "This is deep." "Girl," Raphael said. His voice was gravelly, like boots crunching on loose stones. He did not look at my face. He was focused entirely on the torn flesh. "It needs stitches. Proper ones. Not what I can do here. I have a radio. I call the Coast Guard. We get you to the hospital in maybe 2 hours. Panic. Sharp and immediate. Spiked in my chest. It overrode the cold. It overrode the pain. No." I rasped. My throat felt like I had swallowed a handful of broken glass. "No hospital. No police." Raphael paused. He looked up at me for the first time since he had hauled me onto the deck. His eyes were dark, set deep under bushy gray eyebrows. "Why you are hurt? You fell off a boat. That is an accident. Accidents need police reports. It was not an accident," I said. The words tumbled out, fueled by a desperate need to make him understand the monster I was up against. "If you call them, my family will know I am alive. You do not know them. They own the police in Harborcrest. They own the hospital board. If I show up there, Clarissa will arrive within 20 minutes. She will bring her doctors. They will sedate me. They will tell everyone I had a psychotic break and jumped. They will lock me away in a private facility until I sign over my company. And then I will disappear for real this time." I gripped his wrist with my good hand. My fingers were white against his dark skin. "Please, they will scrub this clean. They will make me look crazy. I need to be dead. I need them to think I am dead." I expected him to argue. I expected him to tell me I was in shock, that I was delirious from hypothermia, that people do not just murder their daughters for money in real life. Instead, Raphael went very still. He looked at me, really looked at me, searching my face for something specific. He studied the shape of my jaw, the color of my eyes. Then he sighed, a heavy, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of the entire ocean. "It is not the first time," he said softly. The cabin went silent. The only sound was the rhythmic thrum of the engine and the slap of water against the hull. What I whispered. Raphael turned back to his medical kit. He pulled out a needle and a spool of thick black thread. "I can sew this. It will scar. It will be an ugly scar. But it will hold. You said this is not the first time." I pressed, ignoring the needle. "What did you mean?" He threaded the needle with steady hands. 25 years ago," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe 26. I was fishing the same bank, deep water, good for swordfish. It was night, like tonight, calm water, no storm. He took my arm. 'Brace yourself,' he warned. He pushed the needle through my skin. I hissed, tears leaking from my eyes, but I did not pull away. He tied the first knot. 'I found a woman,' he continued, his voice rhythmic, matching the motion of his hands. She was clinging to a cooler, just a white plastic cooler. She had been in the water longer than you. Her lips were blue. Her heart was barely beating. I forgot the pain in my arm. A cold dread that had nothing to do with the temperature started to pool in my stomach. 'Who was she?' I asked. She was young, beautiful, even when she was dying. Dark hair, eyes like yours." He paused to wipe a bead of blood from my arm. "We pulled her up. We wrapped her in every blanket we had. We tried to warm her, but the sea had taken too much heat from her. She could not stop shaking. He tied another knot. Snip, thread, pierce. Before she died. She talked. She was delirious. But she was clear about one thing. She said it was her husband. She said his family wanted her assets. She said they staged an accident. She kept saying she had to get back to her daughter. She kept saying they would steal her baby. My heart hammered against my ribs. It felt like a bird trying to break out of a cage. What was her name, I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. Raphael stopped. He looked up at me again. And this time, I saw a profound sadness in his eyes, a guilt that had been festering for decades. Elena, he said. Her name was Elena Vargas. The name hit me harder than the ocean had. Elena. I sat frozen on the bunk. The name triggered a vibration in my brain, like a key turning in a rusted lock. Suddenly, I was not 35 years old anymore. I was 6, or maybe 7. Flashback. I was standing in the playground of Harborcrest Elementary. It was recess. I was alone by the swings, as usual, because Savannah had told the other girls that I had lice. I was kicking at the wood chips, looking at my shoes. A woman was standing by the chain-link fence. She was wearing a trench coat and a silk scarf over her head, hiding most of her face, but I remember her eyes. They were wide, desperate, and brimming with tears. She was gripping the fence so hard her fingers were red. Ivy, she had called out. Her voice was not like the voices at home. It was not cold. It was thick with emotion. Ivy, come here. Baby. I had walked over, confused. Stranger danger was a concept drilled into us. But this woman felt magnetic. Who are you? I had asked. I am your mother, she had whispered, reaching a hand through the links of the fence to touch my cheek. My name is Elena. They told me you were gone. But I found you. Oh God. Look at you. You look just like me. I had recoiled. My mommy is Clarissa, I said, regurgitating the script I had been fed. No, the woman sobbed. No, that is a lie. Listen to me. Ivy, you are a Vargas. You are my daughter. You have to come with me. We have to run. Before I could answer, a black sedan screeched to the curb. Clarissa jumped out. She did not look like the society queen she usually was. She looked feral. She sprinted across the grass in her heels. Get away from her, Clarissa screamed. She grabbed me by the arm, yanking me back so hard my shoulder popped. She turned to the teachers who were running over. Call the police. This woman is a stalker. She is mentally disturbed. She has been harassing our family. The woman at the fence did not fight. She just looked at me. Her eyes were not crazy. They were terrified. I love you. Ivy, she screamed as the security guard dragged her away. Do not let them make you forget me. 2 days later, we moved. We left the house near the school and moved to the estate on the hill. Clarissa told me the woman was a drug addict who thought I was her dead child. She told me never to speak of it again, and I, a scared little girl who just wanted to be good, obeyed. I buried the memory under layers of obedience and fear. End flashback. I came back to the present, gasping for air. Raphael was finishing the last stitch. He tied it off and cut the thread with a small knife. You knew her, didn't you? I asked Raphael. I tried to help her, he said, his voice thick with shame. When we got to port, she was gone, dead. I went to the police station. I told the sergeant what she told me. I gave them the name Elena Vargas. I told them about the husband and the accident. And 2 nights later, my boat caught fire in the harbor, burned to the waterline. The police said it was an electrical fault. Then my nephew. He was walking home from school, and 3 men beat him so bad he could not walk for a month. Then I got a phone call, a man's voice. He told me exactly what time my daughter left for school and what bus she took. He said if I ever mentioned the name Elena Vargas again, there would be another accident. Raphael looked at his hands. I was a coward. I had a family. I stopped talking. I buried her story with her. He looked at me, his eyes fierce. But I never forgot her face. And when I pulled you out of the water tonight, when I saw your eyes, I knew. The ghosts have come back. I stared at the bandage on my arm. the pieces of my life, the jagged, mismatched shards that had never quite fit together, suddenly clicked into a horrifying picture. I thought about the photo albums in the library at the estate. There were hundreds of them, but there were no pictures of me as a baby. There were no pictures of Clarissa pregnant with me. There were no pictures of me taking my first steps. The documentation of Ivy Flores began abruptly at age 5. The first photo was of me at a garden party, wearing a stiff lace dress, looking at the camera with terror in my eyes, while Harlan held my shoulder with a grip that looked painful. I thought about my birth certificate. I needed it when I applied for my first passport at 16. I asked Clarissa for it. She gave me a photocopy. It looked official, but it was a copy. When I asked for the original, she waved her hand dismissively. It is in the safety deposit box at the Swiss bank. Ivy, do not be tedious. The copy is notarized. It is fine. Every time I needed it for college. For my security clearance at Heliogard, it was always a certified copy provided by the family lawyer. I had never, not once in 35 years, held the original document in my hands. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, but it was a dark, hysterical sound. They did not hate me because I was an embarrassment. I whispered. The realization made the room spin. Raphael watched me, waiting. They hated me because I was evidence, I said. My voice grew stronger, fueled by a cold, hard rage that was far more powerful than the hypothermia. I always wondered why they treated me like an intruder. I thought I was the unloved stepchild. I thought Harlan was just a cold father. I looked at Raphael. Harlan is not my father, and Clarissa is not my stepmother. They are kidnappers. The timeline lined up perfectly. Elena Vargas died 25 years ago. I was 10 then. No, wait. If the trust... My mind raced. If Elena died when I was 5 or 6, that would be almost 30 years ago. Raphael said maybe 25. Memories fade. But the core truth remained. They did not just push their daughter off a boat to get her money. I stood up. My legs were shaky. But I forced them to hold my weight. They killed my mother to steal her fortune. They stole me to access the trust fund she left behind. And then, when I got too old, when I was about to gain control of that money, they decided to dispose of the loose end. I looked at the old fisherman who had saved my life twice, once by pulling me from the water, and once by giving me the truth. You are not a coward, Raphael. I said, you survived, and because you survived, you could tell me this. I walked over to the small porthole and looked out at the dark water. Somewhere out there, my mother, my real mother, had died alone and terrified. She had died fighting to get back to me. I am not going to the police, I said again, but not because I am afraid. I turned back to him. I am going to destroy them. I am going to take every single dollar they stole from her. I am going to burn their reputation to the ground. And I am going to make sure the name Elena Vargas is the last thing they hear before they rot in a cell. Raphael nodded slowly. He stood up and went to a small cabinet. He pulled out an old, prepaid burner phone. Then we have work to do, he said. I took the phone. The screen was cracked, but it had a signal. I looked at the glowing bars. They were my lifeline. I started to understand. They had not betrayed a blood daughter. That would have been tragic. What they had done was far worse. They had harvested a child. They had treated me like a slow-maturing bond. An investment vehicle that they tolerated for 30 years until it was time to cash out. I dialed a number I had memorized, but never used a backdoor access code to my own server at Heliogard. My childhood was a lie. My name was a lie. My parents were my captors. But the rage I felt now, that was real. And it was going to be worth $6.5 billion. The wooden shack in Vega Point was a far cry from the penthouse suites I was used to. It smelled of sea salt and damp wood, but it had electricity, a roof, and most importantly, it was off the grid. Raphael had brought me here under the cover of darkness, lending me an ancient laptop that belonged to his teenage nephew. It is slow, Raphael had warned, setting the clunky machine on the warped kitchen table. But the boy, he plays games. He has a special connection. A VPN. I said. Inspecting the setup. Or a dedicated encrypted tunnel? Yes, that, Raphael nodded. He uses it to steal movies and play with people in Korea. Nobody watches this line. It was perfect. I sat down, cracking my knuckles. The keyboard was sticky, and the screen flickered, but the connection was surprisingly robust. I took a deep breath. For the last 15 years, I had been the architect of digital fortresses. I built the walls that kept the bad guys out. Today, I was going to be the intruder, and the target was my own life. I started by initiating a ghost protocol, a backdoor I had built into HelioGuard's architecture years ago for emergency diagnostics. It allowed me to route my traffic through 4 different continents, bouncing the signal until it was untraceable. To the world, I was a ghost in the machine. To the system, I was an admin with God-level clearance. My first target was the Global Asset Tracking System. It's a database used by the ultra-wealthy and forensic accountants to track liquidity across borders. It requires biometric authentication, but I had a workaround for that too, a bypass code I had written for a client who had lost his fingerprints in a fire. I typed in my social security number. The screen populated with data. I saw the familiar lines my HelioGuard shares, my personal savings, the real estate in San Francisco. But I wasn't looking for what I knew. I was looking for the anomalies. I ran a deep query, filtering for linked beneficiary status and dormant trusts. The cursor blinked, once, twice, then a new line appeared at the bottom of the screen, glowing in stark white text against the black background. Vargas Family Legacy Trust. Beneficiary. My heart skipped a beat. I clicked on it. The file opened, revealing a financial structure so complex it would have given a junior accountant a migraine. But I read balance sheets like other people read novels. The trust was established 30 years ago. The initial principal was significant, but with 30 years of compound interest and aggressive investment strategies, the current valuation was staggering. $1.3 billion. I leaned back in the creaky wooden chair, the number searing itself into my retinas. 1.3 billion. This wasn't just money, this was a kingdom, and it was sitting there, waiting for a beneficiary with the initials IF. I scrolled down to the bylaws of the trust. The language was dense legalese, but the stipulations were crystal clear. Clause 4A. The beneficiary shall gain limited access to trust documents and accounting records upon reaching the age of 35. Clause 4B. Full control of the principal sum and all accrued assets shall transfer to the beneficiary upon their 40th birthday. I froze. I had turned 35 3 months ago. According to this document, a notification should have been sent to the registered address of the beneficiary. I checked the address on file. 1402, Skyline Drive, Harbor Crest, my father's house, Clarissa's house. They knew. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They had received the notification. They had probably been waiting for it. I opened a new terminal window. I needed to see their communications. Hacking into my father's personal email was child's play. His password was likely still password 123 or his birthday. It took me 45 seconds to crack his account. Clarissa's was harder. She used a secure server for her charity work, but she had a fatal flaw: she reused passwords across platforms. I found her login for a high-end shopping site, ran it against her email server, and was in. I searched for keywords. Trust, Vargas, lawyer, Ivy. There it was. An email thread from 6 months ago. The sender was a law firm I didn't recognize, Sterling Holloway. The subject line was innocuous, repending maturity date. I opened the attachment. It was a letter addressed to Clarissa Flores. Dear Mrs. Flores, per our previous conversation, we are approaching the critical window. As the beneficiary turns 35 on May 4th, the trust mandates that we send certified copies of the original deed and asset breakdown to her directly. Please confirm if the current arrangement regarding the interception of mail remains in effect. Furthermore, we must stress that if the beneficiary is alive and capable at age 40, the transfer is automatic and irrevocable. There is no legal mechanism to prevent this transfer unless the beneficiary is deemed mentally incapacitated or is deceased. Please advise on how you wish to proceed regarding the custodial hold strategy. Sincerely, Arthur Sterling. I read the email 3 times. Is deceased. The words were sterile, professional, buried in legal jargon, but the intent was murderous. They had a deadline. My 40th birthday was the expiration date on their access to this money. As long as I was alive, that $1.3 billion was out of their reach, locked in a vault that was slowly opening for me. But if I were dead or incapacitated, then the next of kin, the guardians who had raised me, would likely petition to manage the estate. I closed the window, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. It wasn't just greed, it was a long con, a 30-year heist where I was the unwitting mark. But who was Elena Vargas? I switched tactics. I moved from private servers to the public web, but I used the Wayback Machine and deep web archives to find cached versions of newspapers from 30 years ago. Stories that had been scrubbed from the modern internet. I typed Elena Vargas plus accident plus tech. The search returned thousands of hits, mostly modern noise. I filtered by date 1990 to 1995. A scanned image of a newspaper clipping from the San Jose Mercury News appeared. The headline was grainy but legible. Tech pioneer Elena Vargas, dead in highway crash. I zoomed in. The photo showed a woman standing in front of a mainframe computer. She was radiant. She had wild, curly hair and eyes that looked back at me with an intensity that stopped my breath. It was like looking in a mirror. That was my nose. That was my chin. That was the determined set of my jaw that I saw every morning while brushing my teeth. I read the article. Elena Vargas, 29, founder of the revolutionary encrypted data firm Aegis, was pronounced dead at the scene last night after her vehicle lost control on Highway 1 and plunged into the ravine. Vargas was considered a prodigy in the nascent field of data security. Her death comes just days before a rumored public offering of her company. I scrolled down. Vargas is survived by her 5-year-old daughter. The child, whose name has been withheld for privacy, was reportedly in the care of a nanny at the time of the crash. Sources say the child will be adopted by a distant cousin, a prominent businessman from the East Coast, to ensure she is raised away from the media spotlight. A distant cousin. Harlan Flores. I dug deeper. I looked for follow-up articles. I found a small piece in a local tabloid from a few weeks later. Vargas estate liquidated questions surround swift sale of Aegis patents. The article detailed how, shortly after Elena's death, her company's assets were sold off piecemeal to various shell companies. The patents her life's work vanished into the ether. The money from those sales must have funneled directly into the Vargas Family Legacy Trust. I sat back, piecing the timeline together. Elena Vargas was a genius. She built something incredible. She made a fortune. Then she died in a suspicious car accident right before she could take her company public. Her daughter me was whisked away by a cousin I had never met. They erased my name. They changed it to Flores. They buried my history. They moved me across the country to Harborcrest. Why didn't they just steal the money? Then I looked back at the trust document. Irrevocable. Elena must have suspected something. She must have known she was in danger. She locked the money away. She created a trust that nobody could touch, not even her, until her daughter was old enough to defend herself. She set the age at 35 for knowledge and 40 for control. She was buying me time. She was trying to protect me from the grave. My God, I whispered. Clarissa and Harlan had spent the last 30 years staring at a locked safe they couldn't open. They had raised me, fed me barely, and tolerated me, all while waiting for the timer to run out. But the timer wasn't set to open for them. It was set to open for me. And when the notification arrived 3 months ago, the letter telling me I had the right to see the papers, they panicked. They realized they couldn't manipulate a 35-year-old CEO the way they manipulated a 5-year-old orphan. If I saw those papers, I would ask questions. I would hire lawyers. I would find out who I was. So they came up with a new plan. The reconciliation trip, the private yacht, the tragic accident. If Ivy Flores dies at sea, The trust doesn't dissolve, but the beneficiary is gone. The next of kin steps in. They would play the grieving parents, file a petition to manage the abandoned assets of their late daughter, and finally get their hands on the key. It was elegant. It was ruthless. It was almost perfect. I looked at the screen, at the pixelated face of the mother I didn't remember. She looked fierce. She looked smart. She looked like she wouldn't take no for an answer. "You tried to save me," I said to the screen. "You set a trap for them 30 years ago, and they almost wiggled out of it. My own $6.5 billion, the fortune I had built with my own blood and sweat, was just the cherry on top for them. It was the appetizer. The Vargas Trust was the main course. That $1.3 billion was the original sin. It was the reason they had scrubbed my identity. It was the reason I had never felt loved. You don't love a savings bond. You just keep it in a safe place until maturity." I closed the laptop. The plastic casing was warm under my fingers. I wasn't just fighting for my life anymore. I wasn't just fighting for my company. I was fighting for her. For Elena. For the woman who died on a highway so I could have a fighting chance. I picked up the burner phone Raphael had given me. I had the evidence. I had the motive. I had the paper trail. But I wasn't going to turn this over to the police yet. The police deal in justice, and justice is slow. Justice is clumsy. Justice allows for plea deals and good behavior. I didn't want justice. I wanted devastation. I wanted to use the very skills that made me a billionaire, the ability to see systems, find flaws, and exploit them to dismantle the Flores family from the inside out. They wanted the money, fine. I would use the money to choke them. If the $6.5 billion I earned was a tasty meal, I whispered to the empty, salt-stained room, then the $1.3 billion you killed my mother for is going to be the poison. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the ocean was black and restless. Somewhere under those waves was the old Ivy, the weak Ivy, the Ivy who just wanted a hug. She was gone. The woman standing in the shack was pure Vargas, and she was about to go to war. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in the shack. Outside, the wind was howling against the siding, but I barely heard it. I was deep in the rabbit hole, chasing the ghost of Elena Vargas through the digital graveyard of the early 90s internet. I had the name, I had the trust, but I needed to know who she really was. I found it on the 4th page of a search result for defunct tech charities. It was a small, nonprofit organization called the Elena Initiative. The website looked like it had been built 10 years ago and never updated. It was simple, text-heavy, and registered in Seattle. The mission statement was vague, but specific enough to make the hair on my arms stand up, dedicated to providing legal and logistical support for victims of familial financial coercion and predatory conservatorships, but it was the logo that stopped my breath. In the top left corner was a simple line drawing of a lighthouse standing amidst jagged waves. I closed my eyes, and the memory from the playground, the one I had unlocked only an hour ago, surged back. The woman at the fence, my mother. She had reached through the chain links to touch my face, as her sleeve had slipped up. I had seen something on her inner wrist, a small, black tattoo, a lighthouse. I opened my eyes. This was not a coincidence. This was a breadcrumb. I needed to make contact, but I could not be Ivy Flores. Ivy Flores was dead, and if she wasn't dead, she was certainly being watched. I created a throwaway email address using a routing server in Estonia. I stared at the Compose window. What do you say to a ghost organization that has been silent for decades? I typed a single subject line. The lighthouse is dark. In the body. I wrote, but the survivor swam back. I am the girl from the fence. I know about the trust. I hit send. I expected to wait days. I expected the email to bounce back from a dead server. The reply arrived in 11 minutes. There was no text in the body of the email. Just an attachment, a file named Heritage, Enc., and a single line of instruction. If you are the daughter of Elena, you have the key in your blood. Unlock it. I downloaded the file. It was heavily encrypted. I ran my standard decryption tools against it, brute force attacks, dictionary attacks, rainbow tables. Nothing worked. The encryption architecture was alien. It was elegant, complex, and maddeningly familiar. I stared at the code structure. It used a polymorphic engine, shifting its shape every time I tried to probe it. It was defensive. It was biological. And then I realized I was looking at the grandmother of my own code, the core kernel of HelioGuard, the revolutionary security protocol that had made me a billionaire, was based on a logic I thought I had invented, but I hadn't. I had inherited it. This was my mother's code. I stopped trying to break it. I started trying to talk to it. I used the syntax I had developed for my senior thesis, the intuitive handshake protocol. The file opened. A video player popped up. The resolution was grainy. The aspect ratio 4:3. The timestamp in the corner read October 14th, 1995. 3 days before the accident, a woman sat in a dimly lit room. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she kept glancing at the door behind her. It was Elena. My face, but older, wiser, and terrified. "If you are watching this, Ivy," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "it means I am not alive. It means I lost." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I do not have much time. Clarissa found the offshore accounts. Harlan is weak, but Clarissa is a shark. They are going to stage an accident. I can feel it. They want the patents. They want the money." She leaned closer to the camera. "I cannot save myself. I have tried. They have the police in their pocket. They have the judges. If I run, they will find me. But I can save the money for you. I have locked it all in a trust. It is ironclad. They cannot touch the principal until you are 40. They will have to keep you alive to get it. That is my gamble. I am betting my life that their greed is stronger than their cruelty. They will raise you. They will feed you. Because you are the key to the vault." Tears streamed down my face in the dark shack. She had not abandoned me. She had turned herself into a human shield. She had calculated the exact price of her life to buy me 30 years of survival. "I have set up the initiative," she continued. "It is a small team, lawyers, security experts, people I trust with my soul. They are funded to watch you from the shadows. They cannot interfere. Ivy, if they step in too early, if they try to take you away, the Flores family will kill you. You are too small. You are too vulnerable. You have to grow up. You have to become strong. You have to survive the Shark Tank." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "I am sorry I will not be there to brush your hair. I am sorry I will not be there for your graduation. But I am leaving you an army. When you are ready, when you know the truth, call them. The password is Marisol." The screen went black. I sat in silence for a long time. Marisol, the name of the fishing boat that had saved me. Raphael said he had named it after his daughter. But was it a coincidence? Or had Elena known Raphael? Had she known the name of the only honest man on that coastline? I picked up the burner phone. I dialed the number listed on the bottom of the initiative's website. It rang once. "Elena Initiative," a male voice answered. It was crisp, professional, and devoid of surprise. "Marisol," I said. There was a pause, a shifting of chairs, then the voice changed. It was warmer, urgent. "Status?" the voice asked. "Alive," I said. "I am at a safe house in Vega Point. I know everything. We have been waiting for this call for 15 years. Ms. Vargas," the voice said. "Hold the line. Patching in the team." Within seconds, I was in a conference call. It was a war room. "This is Arthur Sterling, legal counsel," the first voice said. "We also have Sarah Jenkins, lead investigator, and Marcus Thorne, forensic accountant. We tracked the yacht's transponder. We saw it stop. We feared the worst when the news broke." "They tried," I said, my voice cold. "They missed." "We have the package ready," Sarah said. "We have been compiling it since 1995. "Show me," I commanded. My laptop pinged. A secure server link appeared. I clicked it, and my screen filled with files. It was an arsenal. First, there was the biological proof. Item: a preserved blood sample. Elena Vargas. dated 1995. Item B DNA comparison report, confirming 99.9%. Maternity match with Ivy Flores. Then, the legal smoking gun. Item C, original birth certificate. Name Ivy. Helena Vargas, father unknown. Mother Elena Vargas. There was no adoption decree. There was no legal transfer of guardianship. The paperwork Clarissa had shown me my whole life was a forgery so clumsy it was insulting, but the next file made my stomach turn. It was an audio file labeled Clarissa Dr. Evans, 1996. 3. I clicked play. Clarissa's voice. She remembers too much. Doctor, she keeps asking about the woman at the fence. It is disruptive. Male voice, Dr. Evans. Trauma suppression is delicate. Mrs. Flores. High doses of sedatives in a child that age can cause permanent memory fragmentation. Clarissa. I do not care about fragmentation. I care about silence. Fragment her all you want. Just make sure she forgets the name Elena. If she wakes up screaming, increase the dosage. Harlan is paying you enough to sedate a horse, isn't he? I ripped the headphones off. I felt sick. The gaps in my memory, the fever I had when I was 7, the missing photos. They hadn't just lied to me. They had chemically lobotomized my childhood. It is a pattern. Marcus, the accountant, said, We have tracked Harlan and Clarissa's history before Elena. There was a woman in Brazil, Maria Silva, wealthy heiress, married Harlan, died in a boating accident 2 years later. Harlan inherited $3 million. Then he met Elena. Now, they are trying to cash out on you. They are not a family, I said, staring at the files. They are a business. Their product is dead women. Exactly, Arthur said. They are serial predators. They find women with liquidity, isolate them, extract the assets, and stage a tragedy. You were the long con. The retirement fund? Arthur cleared his throat. Ms. Vargas, we have 2 options. Option A. We take this to the FBI immediately. We have enough for arrests, kidnapping, fraud, maybe even accessory to murder for Elena. Though the statute of limitations is tricky, they will go to jail. The trial will be long. You will get your name back. And option B? I asked. Option B is the scorched earth protocol, Arthur said. We do not go to the police yet. We use the trust. We use your knowledge of their finances. We dismantle them. We strip them of every dollar, every friend, every ounce of credibility. We force them to confess in a way that makes a plea deal impossible. We destroy the myth of the Flores family before we let the law bury the bodies. I looked at the scar on my arm. I looked at the lighthouse logo. I thought about Elena, alone in that room, recording a video for a daughter she would never see grow up. She didn't want them just arrested. She wanted them neutralized. She wanted to make sure they could never hurt anyone again. Going to the police now was too clean. It was too civilized. Clarissa would hire the best defense team. She would cry on the stand. She would claim she was a victim of Harlan. She might get 10 years in a minimum security prison where she could teach yoga and write a memoir. No, that was not enough payment for 30 years of my life. We go with option B, I said. It is risky, Sarah warned. If they find out you are alive before we are ready, they will run, or they will try to finish the job. Let them try, I said. They think they are dealing with the scared little girl they drugged. They think they are dealing with the naive CEO who wanted a mommy. They do not know who I am anymore. I leaned into the microphone of the laptop. I do not want them to just go to jail. I want them to sit in that cell with nothing. I want them to be poor. I want them to be hated. And I want the last thing they see to be me, using Elena's money to hunt down every other predator just like them. Understood, Arthur said. I could hear the smile in his voice. We are activating the assets. The Elena initiative is now under your command. Good, I said. Prepare the paperwork. We are going to foreclose on my childhood. I hung up. I looked at the video file one last time. I touched the screen, tracing the face of my mother. I have the army, Mom, I whispered. Now watch me win the war. The virtual war room was a sleek, dark interface on my borrowed laptop screen. It did not look like a battlefield, but to me, it was more beautiful than any landscape I had ever seen. A three-dimensional map of the Flores family finances floated in the digital space, a complex web of nodes and lines glowing against the black background. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like a constellation. To me, it looked like a cancer. Miguel Torres, the Elena Initiative's forensic accountant, was a disembodied voice in my ear, guiding me through the anatomy of the tumor. He was based in Zurich, a man who hunted money for a living, and his tone was clinically precise. It is worse than we thought. Ivy, Miguel said. Or better, depending on your perspective. Look at the red lines. I zoomed in. The red lines connected the major assets, the Harborcrest mansion, the vintage car collection, the portfolio of commercial properties in downtown to a single, pulsing central node, the Vargas Family Legacy Trust. They do not own anything, Miguel explained, his voice laced with professional disgust. Every single luxury they enjoy is a lie. They have been taking out massive, high-interest loans for the last 15 years. And do you know what they used as collateral? My trust, I said, the realization cold in my gut. Exactly. They forged documents claiming to be your legal guardians with power of attorney, effectively pledging the future $1.3 billion as security for their current lifestyle. They have been living on your credit. Ivy, they are leveraged up to their eyeballs. The moment you signed those affidavits this morning declaring those signatures fraudulent, the house of cards lost its foundation. I looked at the screen. I saw the yacht, the Silver Promise. A red line connected it to a shell company in the Caymans, which was backed by a loan from a bank in Singapore, secured by my mother's money. So, if I pull the plug, I asked, if you file the fraud reports, Miguel said, the banks will realize their collateral is void. They will issue immediate margin calls. When the Flores family cannot pay, and they definitely cannot pay, their liquid cash is less than $50,000, the banks will move to seize assets to recoup their losses. It will be instantaneous. It will be automated. It will be catastrophic. I looked down at the stack of digital documents Miguel had prepared. Affidavit of identity theft, declaration of fraudulent conveyance, request for immediate asset freeze. I did not hesitate. I did not feel a flicker of guilt. I thought about Clarissa drinking champagne while I drowned. I thought about Harlan turning his back. I typed my digital signature. Ivy H. Vargas. Execute it, I said. Sending now, Miguel replied. By the time they wake up, they will be paupers. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun was just beginning to bleed into the sky over Harborcrest. I imagined the light hitting the white pillars of the mansion, the house that was no longer theirs. The first domino fell at 9 o'clock sharp. We monitored the fallout in real time through the banking alerts Miguel had tapped into. It started as a trickle of red notifications on the screen, then became a flood. Account frozen Chase, platinum checking. Credit line revoked American Express Centurion. Mortgage default notice generated 1402, Skyline Drive. It was a digital bloodbath, and I watched it with the detachment of a surgeon cutting out rot. The first human casualty was Clarissa. I did not need a camera to see it. The Elena Initiative had eyes everywhere in this case. A junior associate named Sarah, who was posing as a shopper in Lumiere, the most exclusive boutique in Harborcrest. She was wearing a wire, transmitting audio directly to my laptop. I listened as Clarissa swept into the store. I could hear the chime of the door, the confident click of her heels. "Good morning, darling," Clarissa cooed to the shop assistant. "I need something for the memorial service, something black, but not sad, something that says dignified resilience, maybe silk." "Of course, Mrs. Flores," the assistant said. "We just got the new Valentino collection in." I heard the rustle of fabric. I heard Clarissa humming. She was in her element. She was the grieving stepmother, shopping for the costume she would wear to play the victim. "This one," Clarissa said. "It is perfect. And add the scarf. Oh, and those pearl earrings in the display. I deserve a little comfort. Certainly, that will be $12,400. There was a pause, the sound of a card being slapped onto the glass counter. "Credit," Clarissa said. Then, the sound I had been waiting for. The sharp, electronic beep of a card terminal rejecting a transaction. "I am sorry, Mrs. Flores," the assistant said, her voice polite but confused. "It says, 'Do not honor.'" "Do not be ridiculous," Clarissa snapped. "It is a black card. There is no limit. Run it again." Beep. Still declined. "Ma'am." "This machine is broken," Clarissa hissed. Her voice was losing its polish. "Here, try the Visa." Beep. "Mrs. Flores, I am getting a code here. Stolen or lost?" "Stolen." Clarissa's voice rose an octave. "I am standing right here. Do you know who I am? I am Clarissa Flores. Call your manager." "I am the manager. Mrs. Flores," a cooler voice interjected. "And the system is locking us out. I'm afraid I have to confiscate these cards. It is bank protocol for fraud alerts." "You will not touch my cards," Clarissa screamed. The mask was gone. "This is a mistake. My husband will have your job for this. Do you hear me? I will bury this store." "Please leave ma'am," the manager said firmly. "Before I call security, you are causing a scene." I heard the heavy breathing, the scramble of frantic movement, and then the door chime again as Clarissa fled. I allowed myself a single, small smile. She had tried to buy a dress for my funeral with my money. Now she couldn't even buy a pair of socks. While Clarissa was melting down on Main Street, Harlan was facing his own executioner. He had gone to the First National Bank of Harborcrest. We knew he would. Miguel had flagged a repeating transfer scheduled for 10 o'clock, a withdrawal of $5,000 in cash that Harlan made every Friday. Hush money, gambling money. It did not matter. We accessed the bank's security feed. The graininess of the video did not hide Harlan's posture. He walked in with the entitlement of a man who had been banking there for 30 years. He bypassed the line and went straight to the teller. He slid his slip across the counter. The teller, a young woman, typed something into her computer. She stopped. She frowned. She typed again. Faster this time. Then she picked up the phone. Harlan tapped his fingers on the marble counter. He looked impatient. He checked his watch. 2 minutes later, the branch manager, a man Harlan had likely played golf with, walked out. He did not smile. He did not offer a handshake. "Mr. Flores," the manager said, gesturing to a glass-walled office. "Step inside, please." Harlan looked confused, but he followed. Inside the office, the manager did not offer him a seat. He handed Harlan a single sheet of paper. I watched Harlan read it. I saw his shoulders slump. I saw the color drain from his face until he looked like a gray statue. "What is this?" Harlan asked. The audio from the bank's internal system was faint, but intelligible. "Fraud investigation. This is my account. I have been a client here for 3 decades. The account has been flagged by the federal government." "Harlan," the manager said quietly, "they are saying the assets were secured with forged documents. The collateral has been seized. Your personal accounts have been frozen to cover the overdrafts. You have a negative balance of $400,000 as of this morning." "But the trust," Harlan stammered. "The trust is not yours." "Harlan," the manager said, "and apparently, the beneficiary has filed a complaint. I have to ask you to leave, and I have to take your checkbook." Harlan did not yell. He did not fight like Clarissa. He simply nodded. It was the nod of a man who had been waiting for the axe to fall for 25 years. He placed his checkbook on the desk with a trembling hand and walked out. He looked 20 years older than he had when he walked in. The destruction continued. It was methodical. It was relentless. At 11:30, an email arrived in the inbox of the company managing the Silver Promise. Miguel forwarded it to me. Notice of lease termination. Revessel Silver Promise. due to the invalidation of the underlying security agreement, Vargas Trust. The financing for this vessel is in immediate default. The vessel is hereby seized. The Coast Guard has been notified to detain the ship at port. All personal effects found on board will be auctioned to cover outstanding docking fees. My yacht, the place where they tried to kill me. It was now just a police evidence locker. At noon, the foreclosure notice went up. This was the strike that would hurt Savannah the most. She lived for the address. 1402, Skyline Drive. It was her identity. I watched through the long-range lens of a surveillance camera we had tapped into across the street. A dark sedan pulled up to the gate. A process server in a cheap suit got out. He didn't even ring the buzzer. He took a roll of bright orange tape and a heavy staple gun. Thwack, thwack, thwack. He stapled the notice right over the brass fluorescent nameplate. Notice of foreclosure. Property seized by the lender. Occupants have 30 days to vacate. It wasn't just a foreclosure. It was a revelation. The document, visible in high definition on my screen, listed the details of the default. It revealed a second mortgage, a massive, secret loan Clarissa had taken out against the house 3 years ago to fund bad investments. She had hidden it from everyone, even Harlan, especially Savannah. The house wasn't just being taken, it was being exposed as a hollow shell. By 2 p.m, the family had reconvened at the mansion. The war room audio feed from the listening devices I had planted years ago under the guise of upgrading their smart home system was crystal clear. The living room sounded like a cage full of panicked animals. "My cards are dead!" Savannah was screaming. She was crying. The ugly, heaving sobs of a child who has dropped her ice cream. I tried to pay for lunch at the club, and the waiter cut my card in half. In front of everyone. Do you know how embarrassing that is? People were looking at me. "Shut up, Savannah," Clarissa shrieked. "Just shut up. It is a glitch. It is a banking error. I have been on the phone for an hour, but nobody will answer me." "It is not a glitch, Clarissa." Harlan's voice was low, defeated. He was pouring a drink. I could hear the clink of glass on glass. "I went to the bank. They know." "Know what?" Clarissa demanded. "What do they know?" "They know about the trust," Harlan said. "They said the collateral was fraudulent. They said the beneficiary filed a complaint." The silence that followed was deafening. "The beneficiary," Clarissa whispered. "But she is dead. We saw her sink." "Then who signed the papers?" "Clarissa," Harlan asked. "Who signed the fraud affidavits this morning? Ghosts do not sign legal documents." "Maybe it is the lawyers," Savannah said, her voice trembling. "Maybe the lawyers found out she died and are trying to take it." "No," Harlan said. "This is precise. They didn't just freeze the trust. They froze us. They froze the house. They froze the cars. Someone knows exactly where we hid the money. Someone knows every account number, every password, every shell company." "It is Ivy," Clarissa breathed. The name hung in the air like poison gas. "She survived." "She couldn't have," Savannah insisted. "I pushed her. She had no life jacket. It was freezing." "Then we are being haunted," Harlan said. "And this ghost has a better lawyer than we do." I sat back in my chair in the shack. I was not smiling anymore. The satisfaction was deep, but it was cold. It was the satisfaction of a mathematical equation finally balancing out to zero. They were arguing about money. Even now, facing the reality that I might be alive. Their first panic was not about their crime. It was about their credit score. It was about their social standing. "We have 30 days to leave the house," Harlan said. 30 days. "I am not leaving," Savannah screamed. "I am not moving to an apartment. I am a florist." "You are broke," Harlan said. "We are all broke." I reached for the keyboard. I had one last message to send for the day. "Money is the language they speak best," I whispered to myself. So I decided to join the conversation. I signaled Miguel. "Send the final email." In the living room of the mansion, Clarissa's phone pinged. It sat on the coffee table, the screen lighting up in the dim room. She stared at it. She didn't want to pick it up. She knew, deep down, that bad news came in waves. She reached out, her manicured hand trembling. She unlocked the screen. I could hear her sharp intake of breath through the microphone. "What is it?" Harlan asked. Clarissa looked up, her face pale, her eyes wide with a new kind of fear. It wasn't the fear of poverty, it was the fear of a cage. "It is an email," she whispered, "from the Federal Financial Investigation Bureau." "What does it say?" Savannah asked. Clarissa read it aloud, her voice shaking. "Subject urgent request for cooperation regarding criminal investigation number 4920. Ms. Flores, you are hereby notified that you are a person of interest in an ongoing investigation into massive wire fraud, identity theft, and predatory lending schemes. Do not leave the jurisdiction. Do not destroy documents. Agents will be arriving at your residence at 0900 hours tomorrow to conduct a preliminary interview." She dropped the phone. It hit the rug with a soft thud. They sat in silence. The house, the beautiful, white mansion they had stolen from my future, was suddenly very small and very quiet. I closed my laptop. Phase 1 was complete. They were penniless. They were homeless. And now they were hunted. "Sleep tight, family," I said to the dark screen. "Tomorrow, the real nightmare begins." The weeks following the freezing of the Flores assets were a masterclass in chaotic disintegration. The financial noose I had tightened around their necks was invisible to the public at first, but smoke has a way of escaping even the tightest seal. Rumors began to circulate in Harborcrest. Credit cards were declined at charity luncheons. The staff at the estate were let go. And the question on everyone's lips shifted from, "How tragic is the loss of Ivy Flores?" to, "Where exactly is the money? Desperation breeds performance." And my family, stripped of their liquidity, decided to double down on the only currency they had left: sympathy. They announced a memorial service. It was to be the social event of the season, held at the Grand Harbor Hotel, a place where chandeliers cost more than most people's mortgages. They billed it as a celebration of a visionary life. It was their attempt to reclaim the narrative, to stand in black silk and weep for the cameras, cementing their status as the grieving, loving family of the lost billionaire. What they did not know was that the check used to secure the ballroom came from a shell company owned by the Elena Initiative. We had quietly stepped in as the primary sponsor of the event, rebranding it as Waves of Memory, a gala dedicated to all victims of maritime tragedies. It was a Trojan horse wrapped in white lilies. I arrived late. I was dressed in a heavy black coat that swallowed my figure, and a wide-brimmed hat with a thick veil that obscured my face. To the casual observer, I looked like a grieving widow or a distant aunt who preferred anonymity. I took a seat in the very last row, nestled in the shadows of a pillar. From here, I had a sniper's view of the stage. The room was packed. The elite of Harborcrest were there, buzzing with morbid curiosity. Reporters lined the back walls, their cameras trained on the front row where my family sat. Clarissa looked impeccable, though I could see the strain around her eyes even from this distance. She was wearing the black dress she had bought with cash after her cards were declined, a little less couture, but still dramatic. Savannah sat next to her, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Harlan looked like a hollow shell of a man, staring at the floor as if waiting for a trapdoor to open. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, his voice dripping with practiced solemnity, "tonight, we honor the souls taken by the sea. But first, we remember a brilliant light extinguished too soon. Ivy Flores." A video montage began to play on the massive screen behind the stage. It was a masterpiece of revisionist history. There were clips of me at press conferences, smiling usually at a shareholder, never at my family. There were photos of me as a child, carefully selected ones where I didn't look miserable. And then, the pièce de résistance, a slow-motion clip of Clarissa hugging me at my company launch, overlaid with sad piano music. Ivy was not just a CEO. Clarissa's pre-recorded voiceover played through the speakers. She was our heart, our little girl. The ocean may have taken her body, but it can never take the love we hold in this family. I watched Savannah in the front row. She leaned her head on Clarissa's shoulder, shivering as if overcoming with grief. It was a flawless performance. If I hadn't felt her hands pushing me off the boat, I might have believed it. And now, the host said, we have a special tribute. Volunteers from our sponsor organization will be distributing remembrance packets to the families of the lost. This was the signal. A dozen staff members from the Elena Initiative, dressed in respectful black uniforms, moved silently through the crowd. They carried silver trays loaded with heavy, cream-colored envelopes. They moved toward the front row. I watched as a young man approached Savannah. He bowed his head slightly and handed her a thick envelope. Another woman handed one to Clarissa. A third went to Harlan. Please, the host said softly, open them. Inside you will find a token of memory. The room watched. The cameras zoomed in. Savannah was the first to open hers. She did it with a flourish, expecting perhaps a poem or a photo of me that she could press to her chest for a photo op. She slid the contents out. It was a photograph, high resolution, glossy. It showed a hand, my hand, pale, wet, and resting on the rough wood of a fishing boat deck. But the focus was on the forearm. A long, angry, jagged scar ran from the elbow to the wrist, stitched together with thick black thread. It was a gruesome, undeniable image of survival. Beneath the photo, typed in bold, brutal font, was a single line. From the ocean you left me in. I saw Savannah's back stiffen. She froze. The handkerchief dropped from her hand. She stared at the photo, her brain trying to process the impossibility of it. She looked around wildly, her eyes darting to the exits, to the crowd, terror replacing the fake sorrow instantly. She shoved the photo back into the envelope, her hands shaking so badly she nearly tore the paper. Next was Clarissa. She opened her envelope with the elegance of a queen receiving a tribute. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not a photo, it was a printout of an email. I knew exactly which one it was. It was the email she had sent to their family lawyer 3 months ago. The subject line accelerated timeline. The text was highlighted in yellow neon marker. We need to handle the Ivy situation before she turns 40. If she reaches that milestone, the trust becomes untouchable. We need a permanent solution. An accident is the cleanest path. I watched the blood drain from Clarissa's neck. It was fascinating to watch a human being turn into a statue in real time. She read the line again and again. Her mouth opened slightly, a silent gasp of horror. She looked at the date. It was authentic. She looked at the sender address. It was hers. She crumpled the paper in her fist, her knuckles turning white. She looked at Harlan, panic radiating off her in waves. Harlan was staring at his own gift. His was a black and white photograph. It was old, grainy, taken 30 years ago. It showed a little girl with wild curly hair sitting on a dock, her legs dangling over the water. Behind her, in the shadows, stood a younger Clarissa and a man who looked like Harlan, but sharper, crueler. It was a photo of me, the day they took me from the orphanage after Elena died. On the back, written in a handwriting that mimicked the jagged script of a child, were the words, "This girl deserved to live." Remember, Harlan did not crumple his photo. He simply closed his eyes. He looked like a man who had just been told he had terminal cancer. He placed the photo face down on his lap and covered it with his hand, as if he could physically suppress the truth burning through the paper. And now, the host announced, oblivious to the silent explosion in the front row, we invite the mother of the deceased, Mrs. Clarissa Flores, to the stage to share a few words. The spotlight swung to Clarissa. She did not move. Mrs. Flores, the host prompted gently. Clarissa jerked. She looked at the stage as if it were a gallows. She looked at the crumpled paper in her fist. Then she looked at the cameras. She realized she had no choice. If she refused to speak, the questions would start immediately. She had to play the role. She had to finish the scene. She stood up. Her legs were unsteady. She walked to the podium, clutching the incriminating email as if it were a lifeline. She gripped the microphone stand. The feedback whined for a second. My, my daughter, Clarissa began. Her voice cracked. It was not the beautiful, tragic crack of grief. It was the dry, brittle crack of fear. Ivy was. She looked down at the front row. Savannah was staring at her, eyes wide with hysteria. Harlan was looking at the floor. She was a gift, Clarissa stammered. A gift we cherished. Her hands were shaking violently now. The paper in her hand brushed against the microphone, creating a loud crinkle-scratch sound that echoed through the ballroom. Clack, clack, the sound was amplified, rhythmic, like chattering teeth. We loved her, Clarissa said, but her eyes were scanning the back of the room. She was looking into the shadows. She was looking for me. She knew, in that moment, she knew I was in the room. We just wanted the best for her, she whispered, abandoning her prepared speech. We never meant for the ocean to take her. She couldn't finish. She stepped back from the podium, nearly tripping over her own heels, and rushed back to her seat, her face buried in her hands. The audience applauded politely, assuming her abrupt exit was due to overwhelming emotion, but the real show was happening at the press tables. While Clarissa was disintegrating on stage, the Elena Initiative volunteers had not been idle. They had moved to the back of the room. They had distributed thick, manila envelopes to the reporters from the Times, the Post, and the leading true crime producers. I watched as a reporter from a major network opened his envelope. He pulled out a dossier. I saw his eyebrows shoot up. He nudged his cameraman. He pointed to a document, a summary of the Vargas Trust, and the autopsy report of Elena Vargas from 30 years ago. Another reporter opened hers. She pulled out a list of accidental deaths associated with Harlan Flores's past partners. The energy in the room shifted. It was subtle at first, a low murmur that rippled through the press section. Phones were pulled out. Fingers flew across screens. The respectful silence of a memorial service was replaced by the hungry buzz of a breaking story. I could hear snippets of whispers from the row ahead of me. Is this real? Look at the dates. The trust fund matures next year. Wait, the first wife died on a boat too. This isn't an accident. This is a pattern. I pulled my veil tighter. The air in the room felt electric. It was the smell of a storm breaking. Clarissa, Savannah, and Harlan were huddled together in the front row, looking like shipwreck survivors on a life raft. They could feel the tide turning. They could feel the eyes on their backs changing from sympathetic to suspicious. I stood up quietly. The video montage was ending, fading to a black screen with my name in white letters. Ivy Flores, 1989, 2024. I walked toward the exit, my heels silent on the carpet. I paused at the door and looked back one last time. Clarissa had turned around. She was scanning the dark recesses of the ballroom, her eyes frantic, hunting for the ghost she knew was there. For a split second, our eyes met across the crowded room. I was just a shadow in a veil, but she saw me. I saw the recognition hit her like a physical blow. I saw her mouth form a word. Ivy. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just turned and walked out into the cool night air. Outside, the valet brought my rental car around. I climbed in and turned on the radio. The local news station was already breaking in with a bulletin. We are receiving unconfirmed reports from the Grand Harbor Hotel, the anchor said, his voice urgent. Documents leaked at the memorial service for billionaire Ivy Flores suggest that federal authorities are looking into financial irregularities involving her estate, and new questions are being raised about the nature of her disappearance. Was it a tragic accident, or is there something darker at play in the Flores family? I drove away from the hotel, the lights of the Waves of Memory gala fading in my rearview mirror. The ghost had attended her own funeral, and she had brought the truth as a party favor. Tomorrow, the podcasts would start. The internet sleuths would start digging. The timeline of Elena Vargas would be dissected on Reddit threads. The hashtag Justice for Ivy would start trending, not as a memorial, but as a demand. They wanted a show. I gave them one, but the final act was still to come, and that one would not be played out in a ballroom. It would be played out in a courtroom. The Federal Bureau of Investigation does not move like a storm. It moves like a glacier. It is slow, crushing, and reshapes everything in its path. When the Elena Initiative handed over the digital war chest, 30 years of forged documents, the wiretap logs, the DNA results, and the video of my mother, the Bureau moved with terrifying efficiency. The media cycle shifted overnight. The headline, "Billionaire Missing," was replaced by "Billionaire Stolen." The name, Elena Vargas, was suddenly everywhere. The concept of the $1.3 billion trust became the centerpiece of every cable news segment. The public was no longer mourning a tragedy. They were watching a crime thriller unfold in real time. I agreed to testify. But until the moment the courtroom doors opened, the world and my family thought I was testifying from a hospital bed via video link, or perhaps that my statements were merely documents found in a safe. The day of the trial. The federal courthouse in downtown Seattle was a fortress. The press gallery was packed to capacity. Outside, vans with satellite dishes lined the streets. I watched the feed from a holding room. Clarissa and Savannah entered the courtroom like tragic heroines in a Greek play. Clarissa wore a modest gray suit, her makeup done to highlight her pale, sleepless skin. Savannah wore black, clinging to her mother's arm, looking small and defenseless. Their defense attorney, a man known for burying truth under avalanches of procedure, gave a statement to the press about malicious defamation and a family being targeted in their time of grief. They sat at the defense table, their backs straight, their faces masks of righteous indignation. They looked like victims. Then, the assistant United States attorney stood up. He was a sharp, relentless man named David Chen, but for the sake of this narrative, he was simply the prosecutor. "Your Honor," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the gallery, "the prosecution calls its key witness, witness number 17, Ivy Helena Vargas." The silence that descended on the room was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. I walked in. I was not wearing a veil today. I was not hiding. I wore a white suit, sharp and tailored, a deliberate contrast to their mourning gray. My hair was pulled back, and on my left arm, deliberately exposed by a rolled-up sleeve, was the long, jagged, angry scar that ran from my elbow to my wrist. I walked down the center aisle. The sound of my heels on the parquet floor was a rhythmic drumbeat. Click, click, click. I looked at the defense table. Savannah's mouth fell open. It was a grotesque, unvarnished expression of shock. Her eyes bulged. She gripped the edge of the table so hard her fingernails scraped against the wood. Clarissa did not scream. She recoiled. She physically shrank back in her chair, pressing herself against the leather as if trying to merge with it. Her face went from pale to translucent. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, she did not look down on me. She looked up at me in terror. And Harlan, my father, the man who had raised me, he did not look at me. He bowed his head, his chin touching his chest, his shoulders shaking. He knew. He had known the moment the bank accounts froze. But seeing me in the flesh broke him. I took the stand. I swore the oath. I sat down and looked directly at them. "Ms. Vargas," the prosecutor began, "can you identify the people who pushed you off the yacht Silver Promise on the night of October 14th? "Yes," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of a CEO closing a deal. "They are sitting right there, Clarissa Flores and Savannah Flores." The prosecutor wasted no time. He didn't start with the night on the boat. He started with the beginning. "Exhibit A," he announced. A document appeared on the screens for the jury. It was a birth certificate. "Please read the name of the mother on this document." "Elena Vargas," I read. "Exhibit B," he continued. "DNA analysis comparing the witness to the defendant. Harlan Flores, probability of paternity. 0%, I read. "Exhibit C," he said. "DNA analysis comparing the witness to the defendant. Clarissa Flores, probability of maternity. 0%. The jury was scribbling furiously. The gallery was buzzing. But the judge banged his gavel for silence. Then came the witnesses. Rafael Moreno took the stand. The old fisherman looked out of place in his Sunday best, but his voice rang with the authority of the sea. He told the jury about the night he pulled me from the water. He described the wound. He described my terror. Then, he told them about the other woman. 25 years ago, Rafael said, pointing a calloused finger at Harlan. I pulled a woman from the same water. She told me her husband was trying to kill her for her company. Her name was Elena, and that man there, he threatened my family if I ever spoke her name. The connection was electric. You could feel the jury connecting the dots. 2 women, 2 fortunes, 1 method. Next came the forensic accountant from the Elena Initiative. He projected the war room map onto the court screens. He showed the red lines. He showed the loans. He showed the email from Clarissa explicitly stating that I needed to be handled before I turned 40. Then, a surprise witness, an elderly man, frail and wheeling an oxygen tank, was wheeled in. Dr. Evans, the former county coroner. I was paid. Dr. Evans wheezed into the microphone. $50,000, cash, in a briefcase. Mr. Flores gave it to me. He told me to classify the death of Elena Vargas as a traffic accident. He told me to lose the toxicology report that showed she had been drugged before she got behind the wheel. The courtroom erupted. This was not just fraud anymore. This was murder. Clarissa whispered furiously to her lawyer. Savannah was crying, shaking her head, mouthing lies, all lies. Then, the twist happened. Harlan Flores stood up. His lawyer tried to grab his arm, to pull him back down, but Harlan shoved him away. He looked old. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been carrying a boulder for 3 decades and just wanted to put it down. Your Honor, Harlan said, his voice trembling. I want to speak. Mr. Flores, the judge warned, you are advised to listen to your counsel. No, Harlan said. He looked at me. Tears were streaming down his face. I cannot do this anymore. She looks exactly like her mother. The room went deathly silent. I did it, Harlan said. I signed the papers. I claimed I was senile when the investigators came. But I wasn't. I knew everything. Harlan, shut up, Clarissa shrieked. She lunged at him, clawing at his jacket. He is lying. He has dementia. Do not listen to him. The bailiffs moved in, but Harlan kept talking, shouting over his wife's screams. I helped them steal the money, Harlan yelled. But I did not destroy the box. I kept the original autopsy report. I kept Elena's diary. It is in the safety deposit box in Zurich. I kept it because I knew one day Ivy would come back. You traitor, Savannah screamed. She stood up and threw a glass of water at her father. You ruined us. You are weak. You are pathetic. It was a spectacle of absolute disintegration. Clarissa was being restrained by a bailiff, her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. Savannah was sobbing and cursing. Harlan was slumped in his chair, weeping into his hands. The jury watched it all. They saw the polished, grieving family dissolve into a pack of wolves turning on each other. They saw the greed. They saw the hatred. I sat on the witness stand and watched. I did not smile. I did not cry. I just watched the fire burn. The prosecutor waited for order to be restored. Then he turned to me for the final question. Ms. Vargas, he said softly, you lived with these people for 30 years. You called them mom and dad. You called her sister. Looking at them now, looking at what they did to your mother and to you, do you consider them family? I looked at Clarissa, who was panting, her hair disheveled. I looked at Savannah, whose mascara was running in black streaks down her face. I looked at Harlan, the man who had saved the evidence but killed the woman. No, I said. My voice filled the room. They were not a family. They were an environment. They were a shark tank I had to survive. I leaned into the microphone. Family is the people who pull you out of the water, I said. Family is not the people who push you in to pay off a mortgage. The closing arguments were a formality. The prosecutor painted the picture that the jury already knew was true. He described a business model built on the bodies of women. He described Elena Vargas, a genius who died trying to protect her daughter. He described Ivy Flores, the girl who was harvested for her inheritance. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman did not look at the defense table. We find the defendant, Clarissa Flores, guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder in the first degree, wire fraud, identity theft. We find the defendant, Savannah Flores, guilty, attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit fraud. We find the defendant, Harlan Flores, guilty, accessory to murder, fraud. Clarissa let out a wail that sounded like an animal caught in a trap. Savannah collapsed onto the table. Harlan just nodded, accepting the weight of the sentence. They were facing decades, federal prison, no parole. As the bailiffs moved to handcuff them, Clarissa looked back at me one last time. Her eyes were wild, pleading. She wanted to say something. Maybe she wanted to ask for mercy. Maybe she wanted to remind me of the time she bought me a dress or took me to lunch. I didn't give her the chance. I stood up, smoothed my white suit, turned my back on them, and walked out of the courtroom. The ghosts had been laid to rest. The name Ivy Flores was dead, left on the floor of that courtroom, along with the wreckage of the people who had invented her. I walked out into the sunlight as Ivy Vargas, and I had a lot of work to do. Let us return for a moment to that living room. Let us go back to the night I walked in from the dead, sat on the velvet armchair, and pointed to the silver box on the coffee table. My family had stared at it as if it were a bomb. In a way, they were right. Explosives destroy structures, but the contents of that box were designed to destroy lives. When the authorities finally unsealed it as evidence, they did not find a weapon. They found a simple, matte black USB drive and 3 cream-colored envelopes, each sealed with red wax. The USB drive contained the digital autopsy of the Flores empire. It held the forensic accounting records proving they had leveraged the Vargas Trust to fund their lifestyle. It held the scanned copies of the original birth certificate. It held the audio files of Clarissa conspiring with doctors to erase my memory. It was the repository of their sins, formatted and indexed for the prosecution. But the envelopes, those were personal. I had written them on the boat ride back from the offshore rig, my hands shaking not from cold, but from the sheer, vibrating intensity of my rage. The first letter was addressed to Clarissa. Clarissa. It read, "For 30 years, you have monetized the title of mother. You turned my childhood trauma into a fundraising speech. You turned my academic success into a photo opportunity for your social climbing. You treated me like a high-yielding stock that you could harvest dividends from, provided you kept the truth suppressed. You thought you could buy my silence with expensive schools and indifference. You were wrong. Inside this box is the only gift I have ever truly given you. It is the truth. It is the one thing your credit card cannot buy, and the one fire your publicist cannot put out. Enjoy the ruins. You built them." The second letter was for Savannah. Savannah. Do you remember the sound of the water when you pushed me? I do. I remember the cold. I remember the darkness. I remember you smiling. You did it for money. You did it for a house you did not own and a reputation you did not earn. When the bank takes your car tomorrow, when the press tears your name apart next week, when you are sitting in a cell wondering where your friends went, I want you to remember that sensation, the feeling of falling, the feeling of being completely alone in the cold. But know this: losing your money and your status is just a sneeze compared to what you tried to do to me. You tried to take my breath. I am only taking your lifestyle. The third letter was for Harlan. Father. I struggle to call you that. A father protects. You simply observed. You watched them drug me. You watched them steal from me. You watched them plan my murder. You are a coward. Harlan, but you are a complicated coward. I know you kept the diary. I know you kept the original autopsy report in the Zurich box. You left a trail of breadcrumbs because you were too weak to stop them, but too guilty to let them get away with it completely. You are not good enough to be my father, But you were just weak enough to prove that silence is also a crime. Your punishment is not prison. Your punishment is knowing that Elena died waiting for you to be a man, and you never were. These letters were read into the record during the sentencing phase. I watched from the gallery as Clarissa squeezed her eyes shut, refusing to look at the paper. Savannah cried, but they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. Harlan just nodded, accepting every word as if it were a sentence handed down by God himself. But I had one more gift. It was not delivered in the courtroom. It was not delivered to the mansion. It was delivered 3 weeks after the verdict, when the steel doors of the federal penitentiary had slammed shut behind them. I petitioned the warden to allow a single personal item to be delivered to each of them. It was a cheap, plastic MP3 player, the kind you can buy at a drugstore for $20. It had no screen. It had no internet access. It contained a single audio file. I had found the tape in the digital archives of the Elena Initiative. It was a recording my mother made the day before she died. She had recorded it on a dictaphone, intending it to be played for me if she survived the escape. She never did, but the voice remained, in her cell, stripped of her designer clothes, wearing a shapeless orange jumpsuit. Clarissa put on the headphones. She pressed play. "My name is Elena Vargas," the voice said. It was strong. It was vibrant. It was the voice of a woman who built empires, not a woman who married them. And I am recording this for my daughter, Ivy. Clarissa sat on her cot, listening to the woman she had tried to erase. Elena spoke of love. She spoke of resilience. She spoke of the future she wanted for me. "They will try to make you small, Ivy," Elena's voice said across the decades. "They will try to make you think you need them, but you are a Vargas. You have fire in your blood. If I do not make it, know that I am hiding the future for you. I am locking it away where their greed cannot reach it." Clarissa realized, sitting in that concrete box, that she had never been the protagonist of this story. She had thought she was the queen of Harborcrest. In reality, she was just a footnote in the biography of a woman who had been dead for 30 years. She was the villain who lost to a ghost. Savannah received the same player. She listened to it in the recreation yard. "Use your pain, Ivy," Elena said. "Pain is energy. Do not let it consume you. Let it fuel you. Protect people. Build things. You do not belong to them. You never belonged to them." Savannah screamed. She threw the player against the concrete wall, shattering the plastic casing. The other inmates stared, but nobody moved. The device was broken, but the words were not. They had lodged in her brain like a splinter. You never belonged to them. Back in the world of the living. I was busy. The legal process to dissolve the fraudulent guardianship and reclaim the Vargas Family Legacy Trust took 6 months. When the dust settled, and the assets from the Flores estate were liquidated and added to the principal. The total valuation sat at just over $2 billion. It was an obscene amount of money. It was enough to buy islands. It was enough to build rockets. I did neither. I stood in front of the press outside the courthouse on the day the transfer was finalized. The microphones were shoved in my face. Everyone wanted to know what the revenge billionaire was going to do next. "Are you going to buy a new yacht?" one reporter shouted. "Are you going to take Heliogard private?" another asked. I stepped up to the podium. "I am dissolving the Vargas Trust," I announced. The crowd gasped. "And I am rolling the entire sum, every single cent of the $2 billion, into a new entity." I pointed to the banner behind me. It bore a simple logo, a lighthouse standing amidst jagged waves. "The Elena Initiative is no longer a secret organization," I said. "We are expanding. We are going to build safe houses in every major city for women and children escaping financial abuse. We are funding a legal defense corps to represent victims of predatory conservatorships. We are establishing the Elena Scholarship for orphans who want to study computer science. And we are funding a research institute dedicated to the psychological recovery of children raised in narcissistic family systems." A reporter raised his hand. "But Ms. Vargas, do you feel you have gotten your revenge? They are in prison. You have the money. Is it over?" I looked directly into the camera lens. Revenge is not about making them suffer, I said. That is just punishment. Punishment is the job of the state. Revenge is something more personal. Revenge is refusing to be what they wanted you to be. I paused, letting the words sink in. They wanted a victim. I became a CEO. They wanted a corpse. I became a survivor. Real revenge is every time a woman walks out of a hell like the one I lived in, and she does it using the resources my mother left for me. Revenge is using their defeat to fuel someone else's victory. The final scene of this chapter did not happen in a boardroom or a courtroom. It happened on a cliff overlooking the ocean, 5 miles north of where the Silver Promise had gone dark that night. I stood on the edge of the precipice. The wind was whipping my hair across my face. The ocean below was churning, a chaotic mix of gray and blue foam. It looked angry. It looked hungry. I looked down at my left arm. The scar was still there, a thick, raised line of keloid tissue. It would never fade. I did not want it to fade. It was my map. It was the receipt for the price I had paid to be standing here. I took out my own MP3 player. I put the earbuds in. I pressed play on the final segment of my mother's tape. "Do not look back. Ivy," Elena whispered in my ear. "The water is behind you. The land is ahead. You made it. I love you." I didn't cry. I had cried enough salt water to fill the bay. Instead, I smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached my eyes, one that loosened the knot in my chest that had been there since I was 5 years old. I looked out at the horizon. The sun was rising, not setting. My family shoved me off a yacht to steal $6.5 billion. When they came home, I was waiting with a gift. It was a small box containing the one thing they could not control: the truth. But the gift I am giving back to the world is a promise. As long as I have breath, and as long as I have $1 in the bank, I will make sure that no other child and no other mother has to fall off the ship just because someone else wants the cargo. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on Ivy's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and resilience, please make sure to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more listeners around the world.